Ryo Ishikawa is widely tipped to be one of the greatest golfers this generation. During his teen years, he was up there with McIlroy. He absolutely dominated the Japanese tour when late teens. Phenomenal player. He's never really gone on to the success that we sort of expected from him for how good he was in those late teens. Let's break down his swing. This is a recent swing from the Japanese tour and see what he does really well and perhaps why he didn't go on to the great things that was expected of him. So if you look from down the line, you'll see nice setup position, very, very traditional, nice neutral spine, little bit of knee bend. You'll see how his arms hang nicely below the shoulders, the hands just slightly outside with the driver. You'll see he's got quite low hands, or the shaft looks quite long because he does play quite a long driver for his size. He's not the tallest fella in the world. I think his driver shaft is around 46 inches, so that's why you see it looks a little bit low with those hands there. From face on, very, very traditional. Little bit of tilt there in the spine just to help promote an upward angle of attack. Love that neutral grip from Ryo here. Very, very neutral. It's just very, very traditional. A lot of good things going on. So let's draw a couple of lines here. We'll draw one on his hip. We'll draw around his head. We'll draw one on his tail line here. And again on his head here, just to see how he moves into backswing. So if we take him down the line, you'll notice he just moves slightly that head off the ball, maybe a centimetre or so there. You can see from that line on his tailbone how he starts to move into that right hip, rotating behind that red line. Very, very traditional one-piece takeaway here, where that club shaft is outside the hands. That club face pretty much matches that back line there. Lovely, lovely traditional position. If we look from face on, Ryo used to have quite a large lateral shift to that trail side. Let's see him here. You can see he does have that little bit of bump. The camera is moving as well. You can see how he just moves laterally into that trail side ever so slightly. Loads of width there. Just love that traditional takeaway position. You can see how his hips have rotated ever so slightly. His torso has rotated nicely there. So let's build him up to further in the backswing here. You see how that club works. You can see how that right hip's going further behind that red line as he works into backswing. Loads of width. You'll see how his hands are nicely centered in the chest. If we look from face on, you'll see, look at that width there, and you can see how he's loading more into that trail leg. Like I say, Ryo has traditionally always had quite a lateral hip movement rather than a rotatory one, but he has really tidied that up in the last few years. You can see as he moves into backswing, you can really see how he starts to put pressure into that trail side. I love that position. It's kind of gone out of fashion, that subtle little slide of the hips, but he's really loading that trail side up. If we just bring him to lead arm parallel, because it's a nice position there to compare things, you'll notice not a huge amount of wrist set there. You know, it's going out of fashion really to get those wrists set really upright that we've seen more traditionally. So love that position. You'll see from down the line how that right elbow is just starting to come out behind his body. A little bit unusual, and you'll see how it potentially can cause some issues further on in the swing. So let's remove those lines. You'll see how that right arm starts to move really back behind him now. It starts to move out. And this is very, very different for Ryo. Ryo used to be really high with his hands here, but you'll see, look how, if I bring him to almost the position where he stops, because we'll look at that dynamic motion in a second, you'll see how that right arm and elbows come way out here compared to what it used to be. It used to be very, very tucked, and he'd get that club way across the line. You see, he doesn't do that now. That right arm comes out a little bit behind him. You'll see he's got a little bit of bow in that left wrist, which just strengthens that club face, but he's not overly strong there. He's pretty neutral. He's not doing a la Dustin Johnson or Koepka at all. So I'll just take those lines off. He stays very short of parallel there. You'll also notice is watch from that halfway back position how that head starts to lower down as he loads into the ground, and you'll see how that right butt cheek moves back behind that line. He's creating what we call a lot of space for himself in the downswing. If we look face on, you'll see his head does move slightly to that right hand side here as he gets up to the top. You can see how short that swing is, but look how wide his arms are. Look how far those hands are from his head, loads of width, and you can just see, look how much he's coiled into that trail leg here. Now for Ryo, the big power move here is watch how he works the pelvis here. Can you see how that belt buckle really starts to move down? You can see how he increases that flex in that trail leg here. So everything's moving down. He's really loading into the ground. What you will notice here as he starts to load down, just clear those lines off to make it a little bit easier, is watch how that club nicely shallows down. But what you will notice is it's probably a little bit too much behind him there. That right arm is a touch, right elbow should I say, is a touch behind him, which I think is where you can get some issues going, maybe some blocks and some too much draw on the ball here. So you can see it really drives those hips down. That arm, because it's been so out behind him, stays behind him there. But you can see very, very powerful position. If we look from this face angle, watch the transitional shift of that belt buckle. But watch how that belt buckle's moving forward as his arms are still moving back. So watch that belt buckle's moving forward. The arms are almost going back or staying there as you see that big, big shift. If I draw a line here, just watch how much closer he gets to that line. Very, very powerful move. You'll see if we just draw a line on his head here, watch how much he drives down through that shot. Just a lovely, lovely position. You can see how he's got more knee flex there as he's really working through those legs to create a lot of power and speed. You'll see, for me, those arms are just a touch behind him. That right elbow is nice and low, which will shallow the club, but I'd just like to see him a little bit more out in front of his body. But you can see how powerful that move is. He almost looks like a baseball, I don't even know the word, like somebody swinging a baseball bat, where they really get lots of drive through those knees in the downswing. You can see he's just really driving that trail knee towards the left here. Look how much he's created that lag. But that does for me cause some issues, because like I said, that right arm's just a little bit behind him there. There's quite a big gap between those arms for somebody like himself. He gets loads of rotation through those hips. Let's bring him down a couple more frames and get him in that pre-impact position. You can see here for me that club is just a little bit out behind him, which is just going to promote this into out swing path, which can cause too much of that draw spin on the golf ball, or if he doesn't rotate the face, that block out to the right, which I think can cause some of his inconsistencies. I'd like to see Ryo just getting that right arm in the backswing a little bit more here with a steeper shoulder plane, just to get that club more out in front of him rather than dropping down behind him in the downswing. So it's just a little bit down, and then you can see there it's just a little bit inside. But I mean, it's a very, very athletic move. He must be very, very supple, because look at the position of his hips there and how far rotated they are. You'll see as well is if we look at that belt buckle and look how it drives down and then starts to drive up through the shot. You can see this sort of hook action there where the belt buckle starts here and then drives up. Very, very powerful. Not a big guy, but it helps him create a tremendous amount of speed. As you see, it drives down and then up. Left leg starts to straighten. then look at that width there through the shot. You can see, look how his belt buckle's facing the target in that forward position there. You can see how much he has to really chase through with his right hand there. It's almost coming off the club. You can see how his right palm's coming off because he is releasing it so hard. Great way to develop speed, but for me, I'd just like to see that club exiting a little bit more left by getting his arms a little bit more out in front of him in the backswing, just to help him create a little bit more of a neutral path. But you see a very, very powerful move, loads of width. It's definitely a better move on his body than his previous move, where he used to get a lot of lateral movement, and I think that caused some issues through his back. But you'll see now how he moves into that left heel, pushes off the ground, and then finishes really nice and tall. It's a fantastic action. I'm surprised that he's not done better than he has when he first came out on tour shooting 58s. I think he's had a few injuries, he's changed his swing, and also the cultural differences of the US. I still love his action. I don't love that right arm behind his body, because I just think you can really see it in that motion there, how he just, watch how he gets up to the top, and then from here, you'll see because that right arm works out behind him, that club just, or the hands just drop a little bit too far behind him for me. And I think that's where his inconsistencies come from, in the fact that he might just get too much of a push-draw bias or too much draw spin on the golf ball. Great swing. I hope he does almost like a little bit of regeneration in his 30s and we see him winning and living up to his expectations that we all expected of him in the early, 2012, something like that. I'm not too sure. About 10, 15 years ago, we really were impressed with Ryo Ishikawa.